Snapchat has always been a fun way to connect with friends, share moments, and keep up with the world around us. But sometimes this innocent app can become the gateway to something far more sinister. When SnapMap was introduced, it brought a new level of connectivity, allowing you to see where your friends were in real time. But what if that feature was used to track you down, or to invade your life in the most disturbing ways imaginable? Today, we are bringing you 3 shocking stories that prove that even the most harmless app can hide dark and terrifying secrets. These are 3 disturbing SnapMap horror stories that will make you think twice about who you're adding and who might be watching. The Killer Clowns. Back in 2016, there was a terrifying trend spreading across the United States, a phase that many remember as the killer clown phenomenon. People would dress up as clowns and roam the streets, scaring many individuals. While it started as a twisted joke, it quickly turned into something much more sinister. There were reports of clowns carrying weapons, stalking people, and even making threats. This craze sparked widespread fear, especially among those who encountered these clowns in person. During this time, a high school student had just moved to a new town and started attending a different school. As is common for many teenagers, they share their Snapchat usernames with a few new friends. However, they soon noticed that a lot of people were adding them on Snapchat, many more than they had given their usernames to. Most of these new contacts appeared on the SnapMap near their school, so it didn't seem too unusual. The student figured that word had simply gotten around about their Snapchat handle. It was a Friday night, and the student had just returned home after staying late at school for volleyball tryouts. Around 8 p.m., they received a text from their cousin asking if she could come over. The student agreed, and an hour later, the two were sitting in the living room watching Netflix. As a joke, the student told their cousin to look out the window behind her. It was a typical playful prank between them, but this time, the cousin didn't immediately turn back. Instead, she claimed that she saw someone outside. The student dismissed it, thinking the cousin was just trying to scare them back. An hour later, however, things took a turn. The student's usually quiet dog suddenly jumped up and began barking aggressively at the front door. Their dog was known to be calm and only barked when something was seriously wrong. It wasn't a sound from the TV that set him off. The movie had ended half an hour earlier, and they had been sitting quietly, both absorbed in their phones. By midnight, the two decided it was time to head upstairs and get ready for bed. The students lay in bed, scrolling through Snapchat, when they decided to check SnapMap again. What they saw shocked them. 4 Bitmojis were grouped at their location. One was the cousin, but the other 3 were strangers. Panic set in as the students realized they had unknowingly added these people on Snapchat, and they were now close enough to be practically at their house. The student alerted their cousin, and the two rushed downstairs to make sure all the doors were locked. Outside, they noticed fresh footprints in the snow, proof that someone had been walking around the property. The tracks even led to the backyard, which was gated, meaning whoever it was had jumped the fence. Remembering the house had security cameras, the student checked the footage. What they saw was terrifying. Several hours earlier, the cameras had picked up motion, showing a group of people dressed in clown costumes, carrying baseball bats, and walking around the property. In some clips, the clowns could be seen pressing their faces against the windows, trying to peer inside. The student and their cousin were terrified and immediately called the police. Although the footage was over an hour old by the time the officers arrived, the police still conducted a thorough search of the area. They didn't find anyone, but the student provided the officers with the camera footage and the Snapchat usernames of the people who had been at their location. The student blocked the accounts, but not before taking screenshots as evidence. To this day, the student doesn't know who those clowns were or how they got their Snapchat usernames. The entire experience left them and their family deeply shaken, always worried that the clowns might return. The strange ride offer. A few years ago, a 15-year-old who was really into Snapchat found himself in a situation that quickly went from awed to terrifying. Like many teenagers, he was obsessed with building their Snap score, so he frequently added random friends and accepted friend requests from strangers. One Saturday, while chatting in a group with friends, they decided to go to the mall. Unfortunately, the teenager didn't have a ride, so he posted on their Snapchat story, asking if anyone could pick him up. He expected a response from someone they knew, like a friend or a relative, but instead, they got a message from a user they didn't recognize. The Bitmoji suggested it was a guy, but the teenager didn't recall ever interacting with this person before. The user messaged saying they were bored and offered to give the teenager a ride. Skeptically, the teenager asked if the person even lived nearby. The stranger claimed to live in the same state but in a town 2 hours away. The teenager tried to decline, not wanting someone to drive such a long distance just to take them to the mall. However, the stranger insisted, saying they had nothing better to do. The conversation felt increasingly off, but eventually the teenager reluctantly agreed, on the condition that the stranger would send a photo of themselves so the teenager could know what they looked like. Instead of a selfie, the stranger sent a blurry picture of a car parked on a dark street. At this point, the teenager's alarm bells were ringing. They decided not to go to the mall and blocked the stranger on Snapchat. Later that night, they were scrolling through SnapMap when they noticed something unnerving. The same Bitmoji that had messaged them was now showing up at their location, even though the stranger supposedly lived 2 hours away. The teenager quickly told their parents, who called the police. When officers arrived, they searched the neighborhood but didn't find anyone suspicious. However, the experience left the teenager deeply unsettled, realizing just how close they had come to a potentially dangerous encounter. The unknown stalker. One evening, a teenager was hanging out at home, casually using Snapchat. Like many, they enjoyed sharing their location on SnapMap to keep up with friends. However, one day they noticed something strange. A Bitmoji they didn't recognize was consistently showing up near their house, even though they hadn't added anyone new on Snapchat recently. At first, they shrugged it off, thinking it might just be a glitch. But over the next few days, the Bitmoji continued to appear in the same spot, sometimes even closer to his house. Concerned, the teenager decided to take a closer look at the person's profile. There was no information, no mutual friends, nothing that could explain who this person was or how they had become connected on Snapchat. Things escalated when the teenager began receiving random snaps from an unknown user. The snaps were always dark and blurry, but something was menacing about them. The teenager started to feel as if he was being watched, especially when the snaps became more frequent. One night, while home alone, the teenager received a snap that made his blood run cold. It was a picture of their house taken from the outside. Terrified, he immediately called his parents and the police. When officers arrived, they searched the area but couldn't find anyone. The teenager's parents made them delete Snapchat altogether, and while the Bitmoji disappeared from SnapMap after the account was deleted, the teenager couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The experience left them paranoid and fearful, constantly looking over their shoulder, wondering if the unknown stalker might one day show up again.